emphasize enough that this is a hypothesis at this stage. We've got a certain amount of evidence. We've got a great deal of evidence, actually. It's all circumstantial, but on its own, each piece of evidence doesn't necessarily mean anything, but put it together and it's very, very strong. The way this started off was that the Egyptian government commissioned the construction of a replica of the tomb of Tutankhamun a few years ago, and this was actually carried out by a Spanish company called Factum Arte. Now, they could have done it the easy way. They could have simply photographed the burial chamber, the images, decoration, and stuck that on the wall. But no, they didn't want to do that. They wanted to get to capture the surface feel of the walls. So, in order to do that, they prepared did a digital surface scan, and all this material they published online in, I think it was about February 2014. Certainly when I started to look at it, and it's very nice to see the paintings up close. But what was really interesting for me is to see what lies beneath the paintings, the physicality of the walls, I guess the archaeological bits of the story. And so I was looking at this stuff fairly closely, and I was noticing all these vertical lines, I mean dead vertical lines, and other features which looked too good to be true, really, because, you know. So I played around with it and wasn't taking it that seriously. And I thought I can perhaps detect a chamber, a new doorway on beneath the west wall with the baboon decoration on. And I thought, yes, perhaps it's a chamber. But then I actually plotted it out on one of the scans and measured it, and I compared the measurements with the measurements of the annex doorway, which Carter had found open in 1922. And they were precisely the same. So this was, for me, was really beyond coincidence. And then I started to look more closely at the plan of the tomb and try to work out how it worked. What we've discovered, what I've discovered as I've looked more closely at the decorations in the burial chamber, is that we now see 4 walls with decoration on. They've all got a yellow background, and we assume it's a kind of unity. But in fact, the Getty Conservation Institute several years ago did some close analysis and cross-sectioning of the paintings, and they discovered that the north wall was very different to the east, west, and south walls. And in fact, the yellow background we see now had originally started off life as a white background, and the yellow had simply been added by painting around the existing figures. Whereas the other walls in the chamber had started off their lives as yellow walls on which the figures were actually added. So the north wall was the earlier. It was originally on a white background. The fact that the yellow covers any original inscriptions shows that the inscriptions currently there must be secondary. This wall, I think, identifies who is buried beyond. The type of wall, using a wall like this as a blind to make intruders think that there is nothing further to find. We get a very similar example in the Tomb of Horemheb, which of course has been broken through, but you can tell that it originally stretched right across. So we've got this north wall, which was earlier, which the subject seems to identify any occupant that might be behind that wall. So I started to look then at are there any artistic features that might something that might give me a hint. And the first thing I noticed was that the proportions used were Amarna period proportions, as opposed to post-Amarna proportions, which were used on the other walls. Then I looked more closely at the what do you call it? The figures of the dead king on that wall, and I noticed that there was this distinctive tick, this line down the corner of the mouth. And I'm sure this feature is not found only on images of Nefertiti, but it is a characteristic of images of Nefertiti. But I think what actually proves that it probably is Nefertiti is the treatment of the figure which is now labelled as eye, opening the mouth. If you look at that figure, you will see, and especially the face, if you look at the chin, you will see it's a chubby little chin with a little double chin. And this is the face of an Amarna child. And there are several parallels to existing known portraits of Tutankhamun. And you look at this now, I mean, I look at this now and I think, how can anybody have thought this was anybody else but Tutankhamun opening the mouth of his predecessor, Nefertiti?
Dr. Reeves, you published a number of reports regarding your theory. You went to Luxor and went inside the tomb of Tutankhamun with a number of experts. You also had a worldwide press conference talking more and explaining more about your theory. Then what's next? What are you going to do to prove more and move forward with the theory in order to prove it to everyone?
I'm here as a guest of the Egyptian government. It's the Minister of Antiquities, Dr. Al-Damati, who decides where we go with this. He's kindly invited me back in November when we hope to have all the paperwork done and we can go back to Luxor and do a non-invasive radar and thermal imaging testing of both walls. In fact, of probably the two of all the decorated walls, just to see if there's anything else of interest hidden there. So I guess by the end of November we should know. We should have a result from phase one. Are there any extra chambers in Tutankhamun's tomb? If there are not, that's the end of the story. We move on. If there are, that's when the ministry has to decide how to move forward with this, because it's not a straightforward process, because there are paintings, two of the most important paintings in Egyptian art history, which are blocking, which now block any entrance. But conservators can achieve all sorts of things these days. In Italy, frescoes are frequently moved, and no damage is done. But these are things for the future, and step by step.